Okay, we'll get started. All right, so today, you guys, Joni and I have decided that we are going to start going over more in depth the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics. And our trustee Josh is joining. We're kind of going to skip around with them. There are 17 articles in the Code of Ethics, but we're going to start with Articles 15 and 16, which provide standards for our conduct with our colleagues, right? So never know where to put the participation screen. I can catch it. Make sure that I'm seeing people hop on. But okay, so we will begin. First of all, again, so the Code of Ethics, I'd like to just remind everybody what they are. So the NAR's Code of Ethics sets the standards for our business practices, provides standards for our conduct with our clients and customers, and as well as our conduct with our colleagues, of course. So they are enforced at the local level through our board. So for example, we're all part of the Greater Milwaukee Association of Realtors, and they enforce the Code of Ethics. Any violations or potential violations of the Code of Ethics, where any complaints would want to be filed, you would see the GMA. So joining,
that's Josh needs to be.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, just a reminder, everybody, when you're joining these trainings, that we all need to be on mute. So, so when you join your local boards, and then through the local board, you're joining the National Association of Realtors, you're agreeing to abide by the Realtor Code of Ethics. And then this is what distinguishes us as realtors versus real estate salespersons with active licenses. So there are 17 articles and standards of practices within the Code of Ethics. Articles 1 through 9 define our duties to the clients and customers. Articles 10 through 14 define our duties to the public. And Articles 15 and 16, or 15 through 17, I should say, lay out our protocol and standards with our duties to other realtors practicing. So as I said, we were going to go over our duties to other realtors. We're not going to go over Article 17. We're just going to focus on 15 and 16 today. So Article 15 includes 3 standards of practices, which we'll go through individually, but so realtors shall not knowingly or recklessly make false or misleading statements about other real estate professionals, their businesses, or their business practices. So first standard of practice within that. So realtors shall not knowingly or recklessly file false or unfounded ethics complaints. Yeah, I mean, so you might have a hiccup with somebody, and, you know, as realtors in the marketplace and practicing, you know, deals go sideways many, many times. That's the nature of negotiations and the nature of our business, of course. But that does not give license or give the authority for someone to make a false or unfounded ethics complaint against somebody. So there are defined standards in which we need to point to if we are going to file a complaint. Joni has a lot of practice with this too, so she will be chiming in where she wants. And we'll have more of a discussion, open more discussion after we go through all of these as well. But again, if you are going to be filing a complaint against somebody, you do need to point to the exact standard of practice which you felt was violated. And they need to be true. You know, they cannot be unfounded, they cannot be false. So, second standard of practice. So the obligation to refrain from making false or misleading statements about other real estate professionals, their businesses, and their business practices includes the duty to not knowingly or recklessly publish, repeat, retransmit, or republish false or misleading statements made by others. This duty applies whether false or misleading statements are repeated in person, in writing, or by technological means, or by any other means. So, you know, if we're out and, you know, water cooler talk is where I could kind of go with this, is just as far as if you are hearing things, you know, people are talking a lot, you know, and if you hear something, you know, that doesn't give you, we need to be professionals in our business, and we're not going to be, you know, repeating any unfounded statements to other people. And that includes social media, that includes other discussions with colleagues. You know, we need to maintain professionalism. And I hope, you know, kind of going through these like code of ethics and standards of practices, the way to go over these things, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm reprimanding or, you know, what's the word I want, Joni? Just like, you know, it's hard to go over these without sounding like I'm blame or putting blame on things, or, you know, talking down, or anyway, just wanted to say that. It's just,
these are words of caution for everybody.
Words of caution. Thank you so much. So again, just more reminders, we're keeping it professional. You know, if you overhear something, which that happens a lot, people are talking a lot. And, you know, it's our duty as professionals to keep what we hear to ourselves, right? The obligation to refrain from making false or misleading statements about other real estate professionals, their businesses, and their business practices also includes the duty to publish a clarification about or to remove statements made by others on electronic media the realtor controls once the realtor knows the statement is false or misleading. So if a realtor makes a statement that is false, it's our duty to correct that statement or to remove it immediately. And correct ourselves. You know, we don't want that left out for others to read if you know that it is a false statement that you have made. So we have a duty to correct ourselves. So there are only these 3 standards within this article. Let's hang out on this for a bit, and before we move on to Article 16, I'm going to kind of open it up. Any comments or questions on any of these so far?
Nope, that's good.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. Joni, any comments from you?
Well, I think I've mentioned it before, but I'm on the Professional Standards Board for the GMAR, which means every once in a while I'm called up to sit on the panel to listen to these ethics complaints that come in. The 2 most common complaints that come in are ethics complaints that one agent is accusing another agent of violating one of these articles. And in their complaint, they have to state which exact article they have broken, gone against. And then it's up to the panel to listen to both sides' argument and then decide if the ethics complaint is viable or not. Maybe they didn't prove their case. And then it's also up to the panel to decide what is done about the situation, whether the offending agent or company is given a fine, given a reprimand, given something that they have to do, like Sometimes they require agents to take certain continuing ed classes over. Money fines can happen. But the idea is to make sure, and then that they have to make a comment about that they made a mistake in doing so. But we get on the professional standards panel, we get a lot of procuring cost cases, and then we get a lot of ethics complaints. It's really important to understand, and that's why Steph and I have decided to do this, is to make everybody aware of, like Steph said, things can easily be said amongst ourselves and maybe in the office, or maybe not even in the office, maybe between two colleagues talking about another company or another agent. But I'll give you a short example of something that happened. An agent in a particular company had a listing with a seller and it wasn't selling. This is obviously before this market. And it wasn't selling. And so they terminated that listing offer and listed with another company and another agent. And the other one was a strong competitor to the agent that lost the listing. And so the market continued to be on, they dropped the price, and the property continued to be on the market another month or so. And the first agent that lost the listing sent an email to the seller saying, I haven't seen much advertising. How is this new listing going for you? And that comment, because it was in an email in writing, that second listing agent who had the listing now took this agent to the professional standards panel and violating Article 15, because she was in a way disparaging the work of this second agent. And I was on the panel for that one, and we ruled against the agent that had sent that email. We agreed with the agent that had brought the complaint, and it was pretty difficult because it seemed very subtle, it seemed very simple, and yet the agent that was complaining was very adamant that this was a slam toward her and a slam toward her marketing, and she prevailed. So these aren't big situations. They can be small and very subtle situations, but that's why Steph and I decided to start reviewing these code of ethics statutes or standards, because it affects all of us in almost every day of our business.
And another comment, which something that I've definitely, I'm never too shy to admit when I'm need to like correct myself or learn something, after experiencing something. But, I experienced something similar actually to what Joni just described, and where a person went to a seller and made disparaging comments about something that I put in delayed status, an agent who I was competing with. And I didn't go to the GMAR with it. And I think, and Joni, this wasn't even a comment that I had, it wasn't even this case that I was commenting to about, sorry, just saying that, like, if it is too small, don't think it's too small. These are things that you should be reporting, because we do need to like start tracking if this is something that's happening often amongst us. And the only way it gets corrected is if we report it, right? So, I think I had brought something up to Joni a few months ago about, it's just too small to even go, Joni corrected me and said, no, I think we need to go to the board with these things so that, they can start establishing trends, right? And if it's something that we need to address later on, whether anything comes of it in that moment, they can at least start tracking whether or not this is going to be something that's an issue, for everybody. So
we have to protect our integrity and our reputation. And if we do have a complaint to file because someone has accused according to our integrity or to our reputation, we do have to make a complaint about it. Just letting you know, just speaking for me, not for Steph, but just for me, I will be happy as the broker to accompany anybody to a professional standards hearing. If you want to do it, I'll work with you up front on how to prepare your complaint or how to prepare your defense if you are complained against. And then I will attend the hearing with you. So it's not something that you feel you probably should do but don't want to do because you don't know where to start. That's something that I can help you with.
Yes, no, and same. Okay, well, let's move on to Article 16. So there's 20 standards of practices within Article 16 alone. So it's going to seem like I'm going to be reading at you a lot, but we'll talk, we'll make comments about each one as we go through them. So move this over to the side. So Article 16 reads, so realtors shall not engage in any practice or take any action inconsistent with exclusive representation or exclusive brokerage relationship agreements that other realtors have with clients. So this is addressing conduct amongst agents when there are, and with clients of agents, when there are listing agreements in place and buyer agency agreements already in place. So first one, this is just kind of setting the tone for the rest of the articles. So Article 16 is not intended to prohibit aggressive or innovative business practices which are otherwise ethical, and does not prohibit disagreements with other realtors involving commission fees, compensation, or other forms of payment or expenses. So I think this was important to include. I'm glad that this was set up like this, that, we have innovative, business practices, and it's not trying to diminish how we are marketing, but unless it's going against our code of ethics, then there's an issue. But this isn't trying to diminish how we practice in our markets and market ourselves, right? There are more aggressive agents than others, and as long as they're not violating any ethics, then they are free to keep continuing their business practices. Article 16.2, so does not preclude realtors from making general announcements to prospects describing their services and the terms of their availability, even though some recipients may have entered into agency agreements or other exclusive relationships with another realtor. A general telephone canvas, general mailing, or distribution addressed to all prospects in a given geographical area or in a given profession, business, club, or organization, or other classification or group is deemed general for the purposes of this standard. So where we get hiccups, and I'm just going to continue on, is when there is targeted marketing towards listings that are already under contract. So if you are sending a general mailing to a farm and there happens to be a listed property in that farm, that is not addressing those types of situations. And that's why all of our marketing needs to include verbiage that states that this mailing is not intended for properties that might already be listed, right? So very important to include that kind of that verbiage on our marketing pieces. So this is intended to recognize as unethical two basic types of solicitations. So any telephone or personal solicitations of property owners who have been identified by a real estate sign, MLS compilation, or other information service as having exclusively listed their property with another realtor. So if you see a sign and you're going for that listing, that is a clear violation. Second, any mail or other written solicitations of prospects whose properties are exclusively listed with another realtor. when such solicitations are not part of a general mailing, but are directed specifically to property owners identified through MLS. So again, it's the distinction between targeted solicitations versus just a general mailer or phone canvassing, where you don't know that general canvas might include a property that's already under contract. Moving on. This does not preclude realtors from contacting the client of another broker for the purpose of offering to provide or entering into a contract to provide a different type of real estate service. So the example that they used here was if you are trying to solicit a property for property management services as opposed to brokerage services, or from offering the same type of service for the property not subject to other brokers' exclusive agreements. However, information received through the MLS or any other offer of cooperation may not be used to target clients of other realtors. So again, this wouldn't apply too much here. Not a lot of us are not having dual service or providing dual services. But actually I could think of an example. She's not doing this anymore, but an old colleague had a business, or any of our stagers, for example. A couple of our realtors also provide staging services. So that colleague could help solicit that owner to provide services that she could provide through her staging company, for example, but obviously not through brokerage services. 16.4, realtors shall not solicit a listing which is currently listed exclusively with another broker. However, if the listing broker, when asked by the realtor, and this is one where, before I continue, this is one where it makes more sense later on. The standards got a little mixed up. I feel like they're not really in order or organized. Anyway, the way that they should be. There's another article later that makes more sense to put before this one. But anyway, if the listing broker, when asked by the realtor, refuses to disclose the expiration date and nature of such listing, like an exclusive right to sell, a listing contract, an exclusive agency, open listing, or other form of contractual agreement between the listing broker and the client, the realtor may contact the owner to secure such information and may discuss the terms upon which the realtor might take a future listing, or alternatively may take a listing to become effective upon the expiration of this existing listing. So if you as a realtor are contacted by a seller who wishes to or expresses that they are thinking of leaving their firm or their agent, if they come to you versus you going to them, that is a different story, right? And that is acceptable. You can start conversations with a client that are spearheaded by them to discuss terms upon how a listing that you might take moving forward after the expiration of this one. So in that case, if you as the listing agent, potential listing agent number 2, has questions about the expiration date and you go to realtor number 1, I don't think this would happen very often in practice. If the listing broker refuses to tell you, the current listing broker, you can go to the client to get that information. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
yeah,
a series of events would be someone calls me, I hate my realtor, we want to list with you instead. And I would say, okay, well, first ask them, what is your contract? Or no. Okay, so they need to get out of their contract with their person. How do they do that? I guess is my first question.
So we can never advise a client on how to end their relationship. You can discuss terms of you can discuss terms of a future listing that they might have with a listing contract that they might have with you that would begin and be effective once their current listing is expired, but you cannot advise them on how to expire that current listing. So the conversation with them would be to get in touch with their realtor and their designated manager.
Between our little group here, though, I'm just curious, how does a client expire? Like, how do they get out of a contract with their agent?
They call the agent, they have to call the agent. We can't tell them this, but they have to call
Right.
their agent and just say, I don't want to continue this. The buyer agency agreement especially is a service agreement. The listing agreement is a little more binding, but they have to demand that they want to expire their fiduciary agreement with them. If the agent doesn't want to respond to them, or they don't want to talk to their agent, they can call the broker in the company and do that. And the broker, depending on brokers, I mean, some companies, some brokers say no, and some say, I don't care, get out.
But I was thinking, I'm like, oh, I wonder like how realtors handle that in case someone ever comes to me and wants to break up with me. I would be like, okay, please, it's fine. Go away.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
I think it's an individual situation. It's based on who the client is and what the circumstances are. You know, some you may be welcome to get out of it. But I think you always have to think of long-term relationships, and people who argue with the client and stick the client usually don't end up having a very good relationship, and that client can talk to other people too. So
Yeah. I don't think it's good business to keep somebody in a contract that they don't want to be. So, if anything ever happened between two of the same agents in the same firm, I think oftentimes a referral agreement is worked out still,
and remember, if they're within the same firm, it doesn't really change the agreement, because the buyer agency agreement is with Keller Williams and the listing contract is with Keller Williams. So it doesn't really change the agency at all. It just may change the agent's name. So.
Really random question. Sorry, I'm not trying to derail, but you have a listing, it expires or is withdrawn or whatever. And anyone who saw the list, like anyone who came on a showing is under, would you call that procuring cause, or what do you call it? Like anyone who's already seen it, let's say they end up buying it once it's listed with another agent.
So that's the protected buyer provision. So let's say you had a listing that you had it for 3 months versus your 6-month original term, and then they went to a Coldwell Banker agent. That protected buyer still applies. So if that buyer saw the home during your 3-month listing, we could be entitled to commission under the protected buyer provision, or under the extension of listing provision.
Do you like get a percentage and then the new listing agent gets a percentage, or is it like a negotiated thing, or is it like it's just you got?
No, we would get the full commission.
Okay. I was just curious how that worked.
Yeah.
You have to send the letter with the name.
Yes.
within, is it 4 days from the expiration of their termination of the agreement?
It's 72 hours, 3 days. Yep. So yeah, very important. And actually that was a team meeting topic. Probably seems like yesterday, but it's probably a couple months ago now. But very important to get those protected buyer letters out within 72 hours. And that's not happening too much these days because of how the market is, but definitely in the case where a good point, like where a listing were to end early, based off of, you know, a relationship gone sour, right?
So then I'm the agent who got fired. I have the names of all the people who did the showings or who came and saw the home. How do I get that to the next agent so they know, or is that the responsibility of the seller themselves?
So you're sending it to the seller, and the seller needs to provide that to their new listing broker.
Got it.
And we have those templates in, they should be in zip form, the global templates in zip forms under the listing packet. So, but if you don't see it, come to us. But that's never going to happen to you, Bridget.
Thank you. Yes, never.
Okay, I think the next article is addresses the same thing except with buyer agency agreements. Yep. So realtors shall not solicit buyer agreements from buyers who are subject to exclusive buyer agreements. However, if asked by a realtor, the broker refuses to disclose the expiration date of that buyer agreement, the realtor may contact the buyer to secure such information and may discuss the terms upon which the realtor might enter into a future agreement. Or alternatively, may enter to a buyer agreement to become effective upon the expiration of any existing exclusive buyer tenant agreement. When realtors are contacted by the client of another, you guys down here. When realtors are contacted by the client of another realtor regarding the creation of an exclusive relationship to provide the same type of service, and realtors have not directly or indirectly initiated such discussions, they may discuss the terms upon which they might enter into a future agreement, or alternatively may enter into an agreement which becomes effective upon expiration of any existing exclusive agreement. I wish that Article 16.6 was actually 16.4. That would make much more sense. But we just went through this. So again, if you are contacted and the client of an existing, who's in an existing listing contract contacts you and have initiated the discussions, then you are free to discuss terms of the future listing.
Yeah,
You just cannot.
You can go over to their home and do a full listing presentation and all of that. You just can't help them get out of their current one.
Yes. So, and I've received that question a handful of times. You know, I've got a friend who has their home listed and they just want another CMA done. Can we do that? And you can, absolutely.
Except, and I had this situation. It has to be the client themselves reaching out to you for information. You can't call that client based on a referral of somebody else. So if somebody else says, oh, my friend so-and-so doesn't like his agent, call him, he might want to talk to you. You cannot call him because you would be violating the agreement by calling him. You have to wait, or you have to tell your friend to tell them to call me. You have to wait till they call you.
Okay, important distinction. Thank you.
Yeah, it happened in real life, so.
All of these are so, I mean, it's just like a slight, you know, switch of how things can be handled, right? It's important though. I mean, we can't control, I guess that's the way to look at it. I mean, you can't control a client coming to you, right? But you can control your actions. Right. So.
I have a question, just like this is stupid, but like, do most realtors first try to work it out maybe just with each other, like pick up the phone and talk to each other and be like, hey, really wish you wouldn't have done that? Or do people just go right to the code of ethics team or to Joni, the board?
I think it depends, if it's a colleague who you've worked with a long time, absolutely, you would probably just go to them first and say, hey, like, what's up? Just like that. That's how you would approach it.
Yeah.
But of course.
I figured that much, but I wasn't sure. But I realized a lot of ways I would do things isn't maybe how everyone does it. So
no, it kind of goes
industry.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of discretion involved in this, obviously. I'm sure that Joni is hearing, before somebody, everybody's going to go to the broker first to find out, like, okay, this is the situation. How should we handle this? Right. And, I'm sure Joni receives these. I'm just picking Joni out here. I feel like I don't feel like I don't hear as much of this stuff where I'm at, which is a testament to the Lake Country crew. But if there's an issue, we'll go to the brokers. Like, how should we handle this? Is this something that, obviously firm to firm, agents within the firm, I think can obviously get worked out amongst each other. Right.
Right.
So. But good question. These are all those kind of like situations where it's, you don't know how to handle them until you're in them. And every situation is different. So, all right. The fact that a prospect has retained a realtor as an exclusive representative or exclusive broker in one or more past transactions does not preclude other realtors from seeking such prospects' future business. So if I sell a house today and close on a house today, it doesn't mean that that client can't go and work with Bridget down the road, right? So it's a free-for-all. It's open market.
There was an old episode in The Simpsons where Marge becomes a real estate broker. And she's being introduced around the office the first day. And she's introduced to this one woman that works the West Lake side. And the woman says to Marge, I own the West Lake side. Well, that can't happen in real life. You don't have any ownership. But if you ever go to YouTube, check out that episode of Simpsons. It's hysterical.
And I love that Joni just referenced the Simpsons in one of our contract trainings. So
I have two boys.
The fact that an exclusive agreement has been entered into with a realtor shall not preclude or inhibit any other realtor from entering into a similar agreement after the expiration of the prior agreement. So again, it's open market after that. So anyone is able to try and earn that client's business after the listing contract or buyer agency contract has expired. Realtors prior, okay, I'll finish this. Realtors prior to entering into a representation agreement have an affirmative obligation to make reasonable efforts to determine whether the prospect is subject to a current, valid, exclusive agreement to provide the same type of real estate service. So I know there's a big cautionary line on the buyer agency agreement. Is the same kind of caution on a listing agreement? I cannot recall. But before, or when you're going over the listing paperwork or the buyer agency contract with somebody, you're definitely asking the questions. Do you have a current contract in place with anybody else? So
yeah, it's more obvious, obviously, on the listing side.
Right.
Can be easily forgotten about or not understood enough to let them know that they may be in another buyer agency agreement with somebody else and they don't know.
Yeah, definitely happens more often with that. But just another reminder that you're asking those questions before you're signing paperwork. 1610, realtors acting as a buyer, agent, or broker shall disclose that relationship to the seller's representative or broker at first contact and shall provide written confirmation of that disclosure to the seller or broker not later than execution of a purchase agreement or a lease. So we're heading this off when we're setting up showings, right? You're asked the question, are you a buyer's agent or a sub-agent? So that's at one point that you're disclosing your relationship. And then the second point, of course, is when you are submitting an offer in indicating your agency. But we must disclose our relationship with our client or customer. Uh, 1611, on unlisted property, realtors, for sale by owners, realtors acting as a buyer broker shall disclose that relationship to the seller at first contact for that buyer and shall provide written confirmation of such disclosure to the seller not later than execution of any purchase or lease agreement. Realtor shall make any request for anticipated compensation from the seller at first contact. So if you are going to be showing a for sale by owner, and you reach out to that owner, you are disclosing then that you are acting as the buyer's agent. And again, it will also be indicated on the offer to purchase, but you are disclosing at first contact the nature of your relationship with your client, and that you work for and will be negotiating for the buyer.
And that's why it's important to, when you write an offer out for sale by owner property, and you've disclosed that you are the buyer's agent, that you must send the for sale by owner a disclosure of customer, and that for his signature, because then that certifies that the seller knows that you're not representing the seller. You're only representing the buyer. So that's required when you're writing on a for sale by owner property.
Yeah, that could be a something we could bring up at a team meeting, I think, in a couple of weeks. Just that reminder that all customers do get that disclosure to customers. 1612, realtors acting as representatives or brokers of sellers or sub-agents of listing brokers shall disclose that relationship to buyers as soon as practicable and shall provide written confirmation of such disclosure to buyers not later than the execution of any purchase or lease agreement. Yeah, how would we, so as a sub-agent writing on another property? Yeah, why am I getting this wrong? Like, I'm not like reading this right.
Well, it just means you have to disclose to the buyer and provide written confirmation of such disclosure to buyer, not later than the execution of any purchase. So before you write an offer or anything, you make sure that you, if you are representing the seller, or you have to make that clear to a buyer.
Oh, sorry. Yes. If you're the listing property, if you're the listing agent. Okay. Sorry, I was just reading that wrong. 1613, all dealings concerning property exclusively listed or with a buyer who are subject to an exclusive agreement shall be carried on with the client's representative and not with the client. We just ran into this recently. Except with the consent of the client's rep or the broker, or except where such dealings are initiated by the client. before providing substantive services such as writing offers or presenting a CMA to prospects, realtors shall ask prospects whether they are party to any exclusive representative agreement. Realtors shall not knowingly provide services concerning a prospective transaction to prospects who are parties to exclusive representation agreements, except with the consent of the prospect's exclusive reps or at the direction of the prospects. A long-winded way of saying that clients and their brokers, the brokers must communicate with one another. The clients are not communicating with one another. So we actually just had a transaction where the buyer took it upon themselves to get in touch with the listing agent and with the seller directly. And, you know, it ended up being fine because we gave consent, but that is a big no-no. All forms of communication must be happening with and through brokers. Realtors are free to enter into a contractual relationship or to negotiate with sellers, buyers, or others who are not subject to an exclusive agreement, but shall not knowingly obligate them to pay more than one commission, except with their informed consent. I don't know how much this comes up. Um, 1615. In cooperative transactions, realtors shall compensate cooperating realtors, principal brokers, and shall not compensate nor offer to compensate directly or indirectly any of the sales licensees employed by or affiliated with other realtors without the prior express knowledge and consent of the cooperating broker. So brokers are paying brokers directly and not the agents directly. 1616. Realtors acting as subagents or buyer agents shall not use the terms of an offer to purchase to attempt to modify the listing broker's offer of compensation to subagents or brokers, nor make the submission of an executed offer to purchase contingent on the listing broker's agreement to modify the offer of compensation. Our commission stays out of negotiations, of course. That to me is a huge ethical violation.
You can ask if you haven't been able to, if you're, say, doing a for sale by owner and you haven't been able to negotiate with the for sale by owner seller, the commission he's going to pay you, you cannot ask the seller directly in the offer, but you can ask the seller on behalf of your buyer client. So that little twist of technology in the wording, you can say in your offer, on behalf of the buyer, seller to pay buyer's agent, blah, blah, blah. But that way, because an offer is between a buyer and a seller directly, you as the agent cannot be talking to the seller. So you can ask the compensation in that type of wording. On behalf of the buyer, seller to compensate buyer's agent, 2.4 at closing, whatever.
And we've got language in our clause library that directly addresses that. 1617. Realtors acting as subagents or as buyer agents shall not attempt to extend a listing broker's offer of cooperation and or compensation to other brokers without the consent of the listing broker. I was trying to think of an example of where this would apply. I mean, unless it was like outside of the MLS. I don't know where this probably does not come up at all in our market.
Well, it just means that any, I think this means any attempt to modify the buyer agency agreement or the listing agreement has to have a signature of the broker on it. So an agent can't directly terminate a listing or terminate a buyer agency or modify either one of those without the signature of the broker too.
Oh, okay. That just seems like a funny thing to include here, but
I agree.
okay. That's why I was very confused. Realtors shall not use information obtained from listing brokers through offers to cooperate made through MLSs or through other offers of cooperation to refer listing brokers' clients to other brokers or to create a buyer relationship with listing brokers unless such use is authorized by the listing broker. Another one where I can't think of an example of where this would apply.
Certainly not going to apply in our tightly knit MLS system in Milwaukee.
Signs giving notice of property for sale, rent, lease, or exchange shall not be placed on the property without consent of the seller or the landlord.
Duh.
Realtors, prior to or after their relationship with their current firm is terminated, shall not induce clients of their current firm to cancel exclusive contractual agreements between the client and that firm. This does not preclude realtors from establishing agreements with their associated licensees governing assignability of exclusive agreements. So again, makes more sense to have this further on up and jumbled with the other points that we've already went over when it comes to ending contracts. But again, we cannot induce our clients to cancel contracts. They must have that conversation with the designated manager or with their agent personally. In the case, well, you know what? I'm not going to go there. So, any questions? Oh, Amber, I don't know how long you were waiting there. Further reading, actually, before we get into group discussion, let me just point you guys to this. So go to the GMAR and the Code of Ethics is there. We'll send out a PDF of the complete Code of Ethics. That will actually go out in after tomorrow's meeting recap. But I also want to point you guys to the Pathways to Professionalism. And there are just some additional suggestions and standards of practice that were, let me just pull it up here. Nope. Were identified. So, and actually we'll be going through some of these tomorrow, but just some additional, issues of courtesy that were developed outside of the Code of Ethics regarding the public, our property, and our peers. So I would definitely encourage everyone to read this as well. And this is, and if you're a brand new agent, you should have gone through a training on the Pathways to Professionalism.
Also, it was a topic that Steph and I covered about a month ago in contract training. So there's a YouTube video on this too.
So we've got 5 minutes to spare. I think some of you dropped out. It's okay. Do you guys have any questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. Again, 11:30 to 12 on Thursday, we've got contract help desk. I encourage you guys to come, hear other people's questions. So Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.
Gosh. Bye, Amber. Bye, Maggie.
Bye-bye.